How's it going, everybody? This is Connor Lavelle, also known as Slight from the Pokemon TCG Cube Discord server. Today, I am here with a replay commentary of my draft for the June Cube League. This is a cube that I built my own. Super excited to have it drafted. I think I'm a little bit biased, but I think there are a ton of good cards in it and really interesting strategies. So, going into this draft, I really didn't know what to draft. I was really just looking to put together something that had strong synergies and would be consistent. And that was pretty much my thinking here. And I think a lot of the draft will reflect that. But let's get started. Here in this opening pack, I think I honed in on Professor's Research pretty quickly. There are a lot of good cards in this pack. I really was thinking about going Mightyena as well, but I ended up deciding against that just because it was a little bit ambitious of a pick to take Mightyena without having any of the poison synergy that would enable it. Mightyena attacks for free if it's poisoned, which is great effect. But Professor's Research, just a really strong supporter. Pretty much wanted in every single deck, and I wasn't ready to commit to Mightyena just yet. This pack is interesting. There are a lot of cards that stand out, one of them being Power Spray, but really my attention was drawn to two cards here. Electivire. Electivire was... I was thinking about getting a fast Electro Wave out and just building a deck about that, so getting Electrodes, double rainbow, double colorless, and just trying to spread 30 to the opponent. On turn 2, every single game, just be as fast as possible. I loved that idea for a deck, but again, I wasn't necessarily ready to commit to anything too soon, and I didn't have any of the enablers for Electivire just yet, so I ultimately just decided to go with Colress here. In this pack, again, a little bit tough. I don't love anything in this pack. Hoenn Adventurer is generally my go-to in this kind of a situation. Hoenn's Cast Form, great card. Although in a lot of strategies, it doesn't end up being phenomenal. If you end up playing a single color, then the multicolored energy don't really help that much. And it can be nice to just be able to attach an energy from your hand with no existing energy requirement. Aqua Patch is another consideration here. I realize in this pack that Metal Saucer only hits like 3 targets in the whole cube, maybe even 2. So I had a little bit of a lapse in judgment when I put that card in, but I do think it was ultimately in there. So I'm pretty set on Hoenn Adventurer here, but funny enough, I kind of re-examined the pack, and I'm like, I think Aqua Patch is just a little bit better. There are a lot of very powerful Water-type Pokemon. Aqua Patch is going to help facilitate those. I had my eye on a couple of different Water types, so I ended up switching off of Hoenn Adventurer and just going Aqua Patch. This pack, not great. Hapu, fantastic consistency supporter. Mina's versatile energy acceleration. Electropower if you're playing Lightning. I didn't pick the Electivire, so I consider myself probably not likely to go Lightning, just because the Electivire is going to get picked up, and I'm going to be fighting somebody for that line. AZ, another great card, but I ultimately just went for the Hapu for consistency, because AZ can be a little bit difficult to take good advantage of. This pack takes a second to load here. I'm immediately looking at the ATM Rock, just because the effect is very strong. So here I'm looking at Regigigas level X, and I think I probably would have taken it if the other Regigigas wasn't in the previous pack. So I'm really afraid of being able to actually build the line if I do draft the Gigas level X here. So I end up shying away from it, and I'm ultimately going to go Golduck, because I do have the Aqua Patch, so my odds of being in a Water-type line are pretty high. That Golduck is not bad as a tech attacker. You just need 1 water energy and then 2 colorless for 70. That is a totally serviceable attack in this cube, especially if you're attacking for weakness, which is what you're going to be doing with that Golduck most of the time if it is a tech line. So I end up deciding to go for the Golduck. In retrospect, Parallel City is an insanely good card in cube. Probably would have been a better pick. Skyfield can be good in some strategies, but I'm kind of on the fence about that. Oh, that's kind of funny. I was actually wrong. I went ATM Rock here. ATM Rock is great for spread strategies. There are a ton of them in the cube, so I was thinking, maybe I end up in one of them. Okay, so I see Victory Bell Guardians Rising. It's probably the best Victory Bell in the line, and I'm instantly just like, that's the card. That's the one that I want. There are a lot of good cards in this pack. The Kabutops, of course, is a line topper. Porygon 2 is great for versatile attacker strategies. Manaphy with Blessings of the Deep is consistent healing. ATM Rock, the second one, would go great with my first one. The more you have of that card, the more advantage you're able to take of it. But ultimately go with Victory Bell here because it's just the best card in the pack by a lot. Here, I look at the pack. There are a lot of good cards. If I do go Victory Bell, Roserade is going to be my pick. But I'm not 100% sure I want to do that, and I don't know if I'm in love with Roserade here. And I do kind of like the Olympia. I just think it's a great supporter in Cube, gives nice healing, gives nice mobility. I know that Grass has a healing theme in some cases, so I'm going to take the Olympia here. So here, I'm extremely happy to see Gardenia come back. Just snap that up right away. Warp Energy is another great card that's in this pack, but just doesn't even compare to the Gardenia, not even close. I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to get Bellsprouts later in the draft, so I let a couple go in the earlier draft here, and I do end up getting them later on. So here I take the Silent Lab. This pack doesn't have a lot for me anymore. None of the other cards are even really close. I don't really expect to play the Silent Lab either, but it's a strong card in a lot of cases, so just take it. Here I take a Weeping Bell. Pretty straightforward. I don't expect to be able to use any of the other stuff. Another Weeping Bell. The Mina here is an interesting pick, but I'm pretty happy to just get the stage 1. Mina is not something that I really want to fight for, and a lot of the grass attackers in the cube do attack for a single energy, so Mina's acceleration is not going to be quite as meaningful as it might be with a deck that could use it better. Here I'm between the Golduck and the Flaffy, and I end up taking that Golduck. I'm pretty happy to get it back, especially because I do have that Aqua Patch, and now that I'm in grass, it's even more likely that I'm going to play that as a tech attacker, so I'm pretty thrilled to get that Golduck back. And my last card here is Blessings of the Deep Manaphy. I was thrilled to have that, not only because I'm expecting to be at least partially in water, but also just because Blessings of the Deep is an insanely good ability. Being able to heal 20 damage every single turn from anything with a water energy is just a huge upside, especially with Victreebel Guardians Rising, having so much HP, having an attack that heals it. A lot of the time I'm going to end up in a situation where I have this big tanky Pokemon, and Manaphy plays that perfectly. So, always happy to have that card in the deck. This pack is pretty interesting, but ultimately not great. I think that the Teammates is a pretty big standout here. There's nothing else that I'd even really consider that closely. Rescue Energy is a good card in some decks, but I don't know if I'm going to need it right now, and my only surefire attacker requires Mono Grass Energy for the first attack. I'm also looking at EXP Share, because Grass doesn't really have any way to get more energy in play. Holen's Voltorb, decent card. But and the Tool Scrapper toward the end of the pack, also a decent card, but Teammates, always strong, always glad to have it. That's the pick. Okay, this pack has a bunch of good cards in it, actually, but the standout immediately is Revitalizer. If you're playing Grass, Revitalizer is absolutely fantastic. 2 Grass Pokemon immediately from your discard into your hand. Going to allow you to just recover your best attackers and reuse them every single time. And in this situation, I'm like, maybe I just try to play a game where I use Victreebel from Guardians Rising 2 or 3 times, and that's my strategy. So I end up picking the Revitalizer here. This pack is pretty tough. I'm between a Victreebel and an Ariados, and I really don't know which one is better. But my ultimate deliberation comes down to, I know that I want to be in Victreebel, and I'm not sure that I'm going to end up in Ariados. So I decide to go for the Victreebel, not because I necessarily expect to play it, although that Victreebel, it definitely has some very powerful effects, but because I really don't want my opponents to end up fighting me for the Victreebel later in the draft. I want to stake that claim so that people don't end up in Victreebel while I'm not looking, and then making my deck weaker as a result. And I don't actually end up playing that in the deck, but it's in the deck until the very last draft, and it's a great card on top of that. But here I'm actually going to pause it to talk about staking your claim in draft a little bit. A lot of the time when you look at a line in Cube and you see that there are not great components of it, in this case, I mean, that Victreebel is a great card. Ariados, I think, if you're looking at the power level strictly, is a better card. But if you look at that worse stage 2 and you say, oh, well, I really don't want it, and you let it go, especially early in the draft, what that does is it signals to other people in the cube that that line is not being drafted. So somebody else might take that, and they are now on Victreebel. And then they try to build a Victreebel deck, and you don't get the pieces that you want, and your deck ultimately, in the end, is much worse, even though, in this pick, you're taking, if let's say you take Ariados, In this pick, you're taking a better card. At the end of the draft, you lost a lot of your Victory Bell pieces because you let this Victory Bell go. So you are staking a claim here, saying that I'm going to be in Victory Bell, and I want to make it so that any Victory Bells that people see further on in the draft are an undesirable pick for them. They don't want to take it, so then I end up getting all of them. And that was the reason I ended up taking the Victory Bell in this case. Here, Milo, good draw supporter. Palpad, excellent card with some utility supporters. I have the Olympia and the Gardenia especially, so I pretty much see the Palpad with the Gardenias in the deck, and I'm like, okay, it's Palpad for sure. Brock's Grit would be the other card that I look at here. Brock's Grit, just really nice versatile recovery, but Palpad is the way. Super Rod, super strong recovery. Warp Energy is another consideration for sure, but item-based recovery is just some of the strongest cards you can get in Cube most of the time. Rescue Stretcher, Super Rod, Pokemon Returner, Revitalizer, things like that. So I pretty much see the Super Rod, just snap it up. Means that I may not even have to take any more recovery in the draft, so I'm pretty happy with that. Here's a little bit tough. So I debate the Charizard G level X, and I debate the Mantine as well. But again, it comes down to I want to stake my claim. I want to have the Victory Bell line, and Wafting Scent Victory Bell is certainly one of the better ones. Discarding a Grass Energy, poisoning and confusing your opponent's active Pokemon, really strong effect, especially if I end up in Ariados, which is certainly a possibility, although I don't necessarily expect to. It's just a card that I want to have. It's a claim that I want to stake, so Victory Bell it is. Here I am debating on Buddy Buddy Rescue, Expert Belt, Cresselia level X. Cress can pick up KOs on Pokemon that retreat out of your statuses really well with Victory Bell. Buddy Buddy Rescue, just a really nice item-based recovery card. And Expert Belt can be a very powerful tool, giving you extra 20 HP, extra 20 damage. Always just a very nice effect. I don't love Expert Belt in a lot of cases in Cube, but in this case, I do end up taking it because I want to be in a situation where my Victory Bell is invincible for at least a couple of turns. Between the Olympia, the Gardenia, the Manaphy, I just want to sit on this one Victory Bell and ride it out and win the game with it. And Expert Belt really makes that even more possible because it makes it so that these attackers that swing for 140 or 150 damage, which there are several of in the Cube, are suddenly going to not be an option anymore. And here I'm really strongly considering that Caress, but I go for the Expert Belt in the end. And I do think that that was the right pick in retrospect as well. Here, pack's pretty much useless for me. I take the Holin's Voltorb just because it's a solid card. Really nice to be able to attach energy. Electrode's a versatile support line, so I may end up going into that just to get energy and play faster. Here, I'm kind of torn. The Trode is decent, but I think I'm more on this Super Boost energy here because I'm thinking about the possibility of going Kingdra as a secondary line. And I actually have this idea really strongly at this point that I just want to go Kingdra Victory Bell because they shore up each other's weaknesses really well. They all attack for 1 energy. They have great synergy with the healing that I have. You'll see the result of that a little bit later in the draft, but I picked that up for that reason. Here I end up getting that Ariados back anyway, so I am thrilled with that. The odds that I end up playing that are going to be really high. Poisonous Nest, just super, super powerful. Being able to poison your opponent's active every single turn is really nice. Dashing Pouch, Mightyena, EX, or Litwick. It's got to be the Dashing Pouch. I'm not even kind of on the other lines. Spinarak, easy pick here. Plusle is actually a great support Pokemon. Draw for everybody, can net you hands of 7, 8, 9, 10 really easily, but I want the Spinarak here because it's not up against anything too difficult. Taking the Spinarak over the Plusle here is just going to mean that I don't have to take it against possibly more valuable cards in the future. And I'm really happy to get the Horsey. In my head, I'm really on this Kingdra synergy. I use the word synergy loosely here, of course. So we're looking at Rescue Stretcher, one of the best cards in Pokemon. Rare Candy, nice card. Cyrus's Conspiracy, nice card. Field Blower, very, very good. Dumbbells, I don't expect to be playing a deck that actually takes advantage of dumbbells at this point, because I expect to be just playing stage 2s entirely, except for maybe like the one Ariados. So it takes some deliberation, but I am really scared of Cessation Crystal, and I think I might end up taking the Rare Candy anyway. So the thinking here is just that Rare Candy gets my Guardian's Rising Victreebel out very fast, and that 1 energy attack, I just want to be using it as fast as possible every game. Rare Candy contributes directly to that. In a different situation, I may have taken that Rescue Stretcher, but I already have 2 recovery cards, so I prioritize that a lot less than cards that are just going to help me get to my strategy really fast. Okay. This next pack is terrible because it is so hard. There are a ton of incredible cards here. I want the Time Walk Azelf to be able to get Victreebel out of the prizes. I want Download Porygon 2 because I have a ton of super powerful utility supporters already. Evo Soda, amazing item-based search. Underground Expedition, even good draw, but I ultimately decide to go with the Verbank City Gym in this pack because I know that it is such a tremendous enabler for my strategy. In a Victreebel deck, so often you are going to leave your opponent's active poisoned, and I already have the Ariados, so I know I'm going to be pretty much poisoning my opponent's active every single turn. It just means Verbank City Gym is going to be one of the most important cards I can see in any pack, at least until I have a couple of them already. Another important card there, Bebe Search, but again, not as good as the Verbank for my deck. And I already have a ton of good support, consistency items, that kind of thing at this point in the draft. That does taper off a little bit later, but at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at. This pack is tough. You're basically between the Pokekid, the Celios, the Evolution Incense, and the Heavy Ball. And I'm looking at my draft pool here to see if I can really get value out of the Heavy Ball, and I can't. Victreebel retreats for 2, pretty much all of them. So it's between the Pokekid and the Evolution Incense. And I look at the Pokekid for a while. I originally go for that, just search your deck for any Pokemon, great effect. But I decide on the Evolution Incense because it is faster. The item-based search, even though it is more narrow, it's going to get me to that Victreebel faster. And here I'm looking for basic search. I don't have a ton of it, but I still decide that I would rather have the item-based search than I would the supporter-based search. In the end of the draft, in retrospect, I do think that this was the correct play. The speed advantage is significant, and it's a little bit harder to get high power searching items than it is to get high power searching supporters. So that is the decision. All right, here we're looking at the next pack. I'm kind of torn. Giant Stump can be a decent counter stadium. I don't expect to be able to really use Special Charge for anything. I'm looking at the Aurora energy because, again, I'm really focused on this Kingdra Victreebel thought. I don't know why. I was just so honed in. It was a strategy that I had thought of before the cube started, and it was one of the decks that I had considered. And here I'm really fidgeting a lot, and I'm having a hard time deciding. I end up going with the Mars, though, just because I'm realizing that I started the draft off with a ton of good support, trainers and supporters, and that has tapered off almost completely at this point. So I got to kind of right the course and take this Mars. Even if I don't end up playing it in the end because I have something better, it's better than nothing if I don't end up with other supporters, and nothing else in this pack is really that good for me. All right, here, there's not a ton to decide. Iris is often quite strong in cube. Professor Oak's setup is a very powerful card if you're playing multiple types. And the Weepinbell, of course, is in my line. I'm not that worried about the Weepinbell. I've already got 2 of them, so it's not that big of a deal. But Professor Oak's setup ends up being the pick here. In retrospect, I don't know if this was the best pick in the pack. I may have gone for the Iris or Lucky Helmet. Lucky Helmet draws you cards as a trainer. Iris can get you knockouts that are otherwise impossible. And I'm expecting to play a mono-type and maybe a 2-type deck here. So the Professor Oak setup is, I don't love it. And in retrospect, I think that the Lucky Helmet was probably the play. In the end, the Professor Oak setup didn't even make the deck, and who knows if the Lucky Helmet would have as well. The deck ended up being very, very difficult to build. But yeah, I don't know. Tough pick. Here, looking at the pack, I immediately see a Turffield Stadium. I briefly considered the Sea of Nothingness just to keep conditions on through Evolution, But I decide that I want to keep the Verbank in play pretty much at all times. Turffield Stadium is going to be useful at a different time when I'm going to want to be searching for Pokemon, and it's just going to help my deck be a lot faster. So Turffield Stadium it is. This part kills me because Pokemon Communication, one of the best item-based Pokemon search cards there is, period. But I see the Dark Porygon 2, and I know that that card is going to be able to allow me to keep Verbank in play pretty much the entire game, even with only one of them. Ideally, I'll get more than one by the end of the draft, of course, but the power of Spatial Distortion to flip a coin every single turn, to get a Stadium from your discard back in play, I just know that that effect, keeping Verbank in play, is going to be more impactful to my success than Pokemon Communication. I might not be able to find an item-based search as powerful as Pokemon Communication, but Dark Porygon 2 is the only effect like that in the entire cube, so I end up deciding on that. I get a Field Blower back here, which I'm pretty happy about, because I'm really afraid of Cessation Crystal, and Field Blower is one of the best cards against Cessation Crystal. So I take that. Pretty easy decision. The Weepinbell, of course, would be the other card, but it's just not a contest, considering how much I want to have a game plan for that. This pack comes back, and it's still good, which I was blown away about. I take the Underground Expedition, because it's the only card that's really good for me, but if there was a fighting drafter at the table, then this would still be a very tough pack. Here I take the Horsey, because I'm fiercely committed to this Kingdra idea. Premier Ball here, just in case I end up playing a level X. It's certainly possible, even though I don't have any yet. There are a ton of level X's in this cube, so always a very good idea to stay on that. Here I get a Weepinbell for free, and I'm very happy about it, so that rounds me out with 3 Weepinbells without really trying. Poochyena, forced last card. Don't really want it, but I don't really have any choice. Here, I'm eyeballing the Ariados, but I'm not 100% sure I want to be in it, and I do already have the 3 Victreebels, so I'm like, it's just okay. I know that Sycamore won't come back for sure, and Ariados might, because I do already have the Poison Ariados, and I've got most of the Victreebels at this point as well, so I just snag that Sycamore. It isn't a too terribly difficult decision, but I am expecting that Ariados to come back, and if it doesn't, then I'm okay with that. It's not that big of a deal. This pack is tough. Very, very tough. In retrospect, I think I would have gone Sage's Training here. I take the Palkia G level X. That's pretty good too. I have the Aqua Patch, I have the Premier Ball, I have all of the pieces that would go into the deck that would allow me to use Palkia. And in a deck like Victreebel Kingdra, or even just Victreebel, a lot of the time, you're just going to have 1 energy on your active attacker, and you're going to be okay with that. So you'll have a lot of energy attachments open in future turns. Palkia G level X's attack cost isn't nearly as bad in a case like that, because you're going to have all those free energy attachments in later turns after you get your first attacker set up. So that's my thinking there. In retrospect, I think it's an okay pick. I can understand it. I see why I did it. The water coverage is going to be really nice, and if I get nothing better, then Palkia G level X on its own is a very serviceable water type attacker, so I think it's alright. I don't end up playing it in my deck because I end up having better water type attackers, but it's a solid pick. Oh, and then this pick breaks my heart because Support Navigation Lapras is crazy. Call Energy very strong, but Victreebel, and in this pack, you may not see it because I may skip ahead. However, I end up counting the number of cards in the pack to see if I can reliably wheel that Victreebel, but I do really want it. I want to be able to attack with it. Ultimately, I count down the number, and there are just 1 too few cards in the pack for me to be able to expect Victreebel to come back, assuming that people are going to leave the Poochyena, the Bellsprout, the Voltorb, and possibly the Skitty. So it just isn't likely enough to come back that I'm comfortable letting it go. And I am going to switch off of the Lapras and onto the Victreebel. And there is that switch. So I do decide to go with this Victreebel. It doesn't end up making the deck, but I think this was the right pick. I had no way to know that I would end up switching off of Victreebel as heavily as I did. And it was the best pick. I still stand by that. Here, I'm like, oh hey, Golduck inflicts conditions. And Lugia can be a nice secondary attacker. but there's a junk arm, and I just take the junk arm. The junk arm is really, really strong. I've got Revitalizer, I've got Super Rod, I've got Pal Pad with really good supporters, Aqua Patch. There are just so many reasons in this deck why you would want to have that reusable item, so I keep that. So, ordinarily I'd take Palmer's here. Time Space Distortion, also really good consideration, just to get the Pokemon back. But I already have a lot of recovery. I think in retrospect that the best card in this pack is definitely the Time Space Distortion, but I want the Porygon. I want the Porygon just so I don't have to worry about it in the future. I think that was probably a little bit silly. The Time Space Distortion, just an insanely good recovery card, and I don't think that this was the best pick in retrospect. It would have been easy enough to pick up a Porygon later on in the draft, because we do have 7 packs, but we're halfway done. I understand it, but I don't necessarily agree with it. I think in retrospect, Time Space Distortion would have been better. Okay, here are the Ariados. I don't know if this is the one that I saw earlier that came back to me, or if this is another one, but there's nothing really that competes with the Ariados as far as cohesion with my strategy, so I just take that pretty quickly. The only other card that you might consider here is Mewtwo, which does have Delta Switch. It allows you to move all your energy around when you play it, but I expect to be using mostly 1 energy attackers, so that effect isn't going to be super good. And here I get the best tech Golduck in the cube. 2 energy for 80 damage, returning an energy to your hand, 110 HP. So this is the Water-type Pokemon that I do end up playing to cover the Grass weakness at the end, and it pushes the Palkia out of the deck. Okay, here we have another Ariados. So this is the one that's coming back. I'm pretty happy to just have another Ariados. So this Ariados strategy is developing, and now I'm really thinking about how I can incorporate this with the Victory Bell, because they do have a lot of synergy, and I'm kind of thinking about the scope of the deck and how that's going to potentially change. And as a result, I take the Koga's Trap here. I think that's a fine pick. Koga's Trap is a great card with Ariados, to be sure. It gets around Power Lock. It is just a way to deal a lot of damage to your opponent's active if you're not able to use Wafting Scent, or even if you're just not able to use Poisonous Nest. It doesn't end up making the cut just because I do end up having a lot of really high quality cards that contend with it later on, but I think it's a good pick here. Other consideration would be Wishful Baton to power up the Palkia G level X, and Sky Arrow Bridge just as a really nice retreating option, although Sky Arrow goes down because I want to have Burbank in the deck a lot more, or Burbank can play a lot more. So it's between the Baton and Koga's Trap. I'm not sure. Neither of these cards would have made the cut in the end, but I do think Koga's Trap was a fine pick here. I'm just kind of hovering here. I'm excited to see the Bellsprout because I have none at this point in the draft, and I'm pretty excited to get that one. So that is 1 Bellsprout of probably 4 that I'm going to need. Here I'm between the Psyduck and the Golduck. That Golduck is pretty nice as a pivot because it can, when something gets knocked out, it can go to the active, flip, and try to confuse them. But I realize I don't have another Psyduck. It's going to be kind of hard to get the Golduck to the active and retreat it every time just because I don't have like an Air Balloon, I don't have a Floatstone, Fluffy Berry, anything like that. And taking the Psyduck here is going to make it a little bit easier to draft later on because it's not, right now it's not up against anything that's high priority. So it just makes things a little bit easier. This pack sucks. This pack sucks. Okay, so here is the next pack. Immediately I see the VS Seeker. And my heart sinks because I see the Shaman with Floral Heal, and as much as I think it's going to wheel, I really don't feel like I can rely on that. And currently being in a very Victory Bell heavy strategy, I'm expecting to be tanking a lot of the time, having a high HP Pokemon that's going to heal itself a lot. Shaman is invaluable in that kind of a strategy. In retrospect, I think I could have let it wheel. I don't think anybody was realistically on any of the Pokemon that it would have been good with. And the VS Seeker or the Level Ball would have been a better pick, or even the Dana. But I considered this to be one of the most important cards that my strategy could get. So I take the Level Ball here, but I end up reconsidering and going back to the Shaman. Just for proof. There it is. There it is. I just can't do it. I cannot let the Shaman go. And this, I think this was just mental weakness in not letting the Shaman come back around, but I was so afraid that even if there was an off chance that that Shaman get picked over some of the other bad cards in the pack, that I would be really sad I didn't have it, so I ended up taking it. Here, Double Gust is a silly good card, but I don't really have the means to support getting out of the effect in my deck. And Victory Bell has pretty high retreat. I take the Candy here. Totally fine play. I think the Hapu might be better, but I was really trying to push for this fast, aggressive kind of strategy with Victory Bells, and I think Rare Candy works with that pretty well. Okay. This pack, I look at Dust Island, I'm like, I want Verbank all the way. I do decide that Erica's Bellsprout is coming back because it's one of the lowest value cards in the pack, and nobody else is on Victory Bell, and I'm certain of this at this point. So I take Felicity's over Misty's Determination. I think the cards are both excellent choices, slightly different effects, but they draw cards that get you to where you need to be. Misty's Determination and Felicity's both would have been great cards here. Here, I see the Garchomp Sea Level X, and I realize I don't really have the means to attack with this card. So it ends up being between the Reset Stamp and the Collector. Reset Stamp is just such a powerful disruptive effect that I end up going with that, and I do think that that was right, but it was tough. It's a really tough pack. Wally could have been really good as well, but Reset Stamp ends up being the play. I'm also considering the synergy with Junk Arm, so I'll go with that. Here, it's between Sophocles and Chatot, or Ariados. I actually have quite a few cards where I'm like, oh man, I really want these cards. But after some consideration, I decide I've already got 3 Ariados. I don't expect to put another one in my deck. So I'm just going to go for consistency here, and I take the Chatot in the end. I do think this play was right. Only other, I would say Sophocles would have been the other pick, but Ariados absolutely wrong. So Chatot, great supportive Pokemon. Mimic is a really great attack. Sophocles would have been great too. Both are fine. In general, in Cube, I think it's a great idea to have a basic Pokemon that can search for Pokemon and a basic Pokemon that can draw cards. And Chatot ends up being the Pokemon that can draw cards. So, always nice. Here, the pack is pretty much worthless for me. Golduck Break, I don't really expect to ever have any use for. I'm just kind of reading this Uxie, but I'm just taking the Spinarak. Rounds out my Ariados line. I only have 1 Spinarak at the moment, so I definitely need to do that. Here I'm really torn between the Spinarak and the Shaman. And I go for the Spinarak just because I don't think I'm going to be able to take advantage of the Shaman because I'm using a lot of 1 energy attackers. So I just don't think that there will be enough targets for Celebration Wind to move energy onto. Mesprit would have been another great card out of that pack. Psychic Bind, fantastic effect. But I'm a little bit worried about my bench being cluttered at this point, and I think that was a good worry, so I end up not taking it. Here, I would love to take that Dana, but we're so late in the draft. We're pack 5, pick 8, and I have 1 Bellsprout? Yes, I have 1 Bellsprout. So, much to my chagrin, I take the Bellsprout. In retrospect, I think it was time. I think it was time to start taking Bellsprouts and prioritizing them a little bit more highly, especially because at the time I thought that I was going to play like a 4-thick line of Victory Bell, and there would have just been no excuse for going that late in the draft and saying, oh yeah, there'll be more. So, I take it there. It hurts, but it is the card. Here I see Toxicroak G. I have a ton of cards that inflict poison, which activate it. Don't have the Skuntank G, which would allow that to happen, but I decided to take it just as a nice basic attacker, and another way to diversify weakness and just get some good damage in for not many energy. Got another Bellsprout. Really happy to see that. This time it's not up against anything that I really care about. Downer Material Azelf is great if you're playing the other Pixies, but I am certainly not, and I am not going to have the bench space for that kind of a synergy. Here, I'm not going to play any of these cards at the end of the day, so I just take the Stadium. And Ariados comes back. I'm very happy for that. I don't really expect to put it in the deck, but it's nice to have the option, and it definitely does fit with my synergies. Electrode, again, just not really going together with anything that I have. The highest attack cost that I have in the deck is 3, and I expect to be using single energy attacks pretty much every single turn, so that ends up being the take. Lampent, last card. All right. first pick out of this pack. I scroll across. There are not a lot of cards that I want that badly. Vitality Band is always really nice. Oh, this is the pack. This is the pack. I look at the weakness guard energy and I think I need this desperately because my entire deck is grass Pokemon. But I am still on this Kingdra Victory Bell train in my head. I just see that Kingdra and I'm like, I have to do it. I have to take the Kingdra. And I had not read the first attack well. And it turns out that the first attack shuffles all water and lightning energy back into your deck. So I was never going to be able to make good use of this Kingdra anyway. So this was absolutely foolish, guys. I've said this so many times to friends of mine that I've cubed with in the past. Read your cards. This was an absolutely foolish mistake. I should have taken that weakness guard energy. Very fortunately, it comes back, but there would have been no way to guarantee that at this point. So that was a dumb decision, and it's really funny to see in retrospect. Sorry to Slade, the guy in my cube who did end up drafting Kingdra, and was very sad to see that that card was not in the pool. Here I've only got one Verbank, and I'm a little bit worried because we're in pack 6, so I think somebody else might have already taken one, and I've only seen one Ariados as well, so I just snap it. Ultra Ball would have been the other pick here. I do think the Verbank was correct with the knowledge that I had at the time. I don't think there would have been a better pick. If I had known that I would see a Verbank later on, which I end up seeing, then I wouldn't have taken it, but yeah, with the knowledge that I had at the time, Verbank had to have been the pick. It's such an important facilitator for the deck that I wanted to play. Here, I just go Candy. Nothing in the pack is really screaming to me, and Candy keeps me super fast, which is what I want. Oh no, I actually reconsider. I go Acerola because Acerola is broken with 1 energy attackers, and that's pretty much my entire deck at this point, so I take the Acerola. I do agree with that pick. I think the Acerola over the Candy is better. Rare Candy is only so good in Cube because it's a lot of the time hard to find the Candy and the evolution together because supporter quality is lower. And the Acerola is, anytime you can take an attacker too and then Acerola that Pokemon, you are in a hugely advantageous position. And I think this was a good pick. I also have the Palpad and the Junk Arm to think about as well. Here I'm torn. I don't know for sure what I want to take. I do see the Bellsprout. I'm like, well, I do need a 4th Bellsprout. And I just end up taking it. In retrospect, I think I probably could have let it come back. There are a lot of good cards in this pack, and I know that nobody else is on Victory Bell, so Bellsprout would have been the lower priority basic. And I deselect it here, and I go back and forth, but I do end up taking it. This pack has Copycat, and pretty much nothing else that I care about. Copycat is the only card in this pack that I care about, and it's a really good supporter in Cube, so. And I see Carnivine here. There's no real other consideration. Black Belt is decent, but I expect to be ahead most of the time. I don't have enough ball cards for Apricorn Maker to work, and Carnivine is a fantastic attacker in grass, so I do go with that. It does not make the deck in the end, just because I end up playing quite a few more Ariados than I expect, and Carnivine's first attack is just worse than Ariados' Spider Trap, and I don't expect to really ever have 3 energy on Carnivine for Spit Squall, so I don't necessarily think this was a mistake, because none of the cards in this pack would have ended up in my deck, but just something to think about. Here I take the Dawn Stadium. I don't need any more Bellsprouts, so that is not a consideration anymore. And I'm thinking about the Dawn Stadium to be able to use and win condition mirror matches. I do think that it was a great pick for that purpose. It didn't end up making the deck just because I was thinking that my opponents could use it as well against me as I could use against them. But I do decide to take that Dawn Stadium. I don't really think there was a better pick. I think Dawn Stadium was great. Bellsprout would have been the other consideration, but it doesn't really matter. It's not that big of a change. Whereas Dawn Stadium has a real and tangible use case. So I take that. I'm extremely happy to see the Weakness Guard energy still in this pack. I do a little dance, as you can see with my mouse over here. And Weakness Guard energy is the last thing that I use to really round out my matchup against Fire and stay out of trouble in that matchup. Here I take the Laser. I don't love Laser in Cube, but this deck has a lot of ways to take advantage of it. I am rocking double Verbank and Reactive Poison, So I might be able to get a reactive poison off for 100 if I end up landing the heads on the laser. It's a great option under Power Lock. So I take it here. It doesn't end up in the deck just because it's a little bit of a weaker option than some of the other cards that I had, but it's a good pick. Nothing else even comes close. Here, I take the Spinarak. Not a tough decision. Here, I take the Elm. Not a tough decision. None of these cards matter. Card doesn't matter. And we're on the last pick. Here I see 2 Shaman level X in the pack, and I'm just like, all right, there they are. I was really hoping to get one just because Energy Flare is a super powerful attack. Being able to swing back for 2 for 110 damage is really strong. And if you have Poison with Verbank City Gym in play, then you get up to 140, which is an insanely high amount of damage. But I end up just taking, I believe, the rare candy in this case because I want to be super fast, and I'm really confident that these Shamans are going to come back. I think the candy was fine because I was anticipating playing more Victory Bells than I ended up playing. The Clefas here are also great cards, but I already have the Chatot, so their priority goes down. What I think I would have taken in the end was the Big Charm, just because 2 rare candy versus 3 rare candy, I don't know. I'm just really pushing for that early Victory Bell Guardians Rising, so I understand why it was the pick, and I think that my later knowledge is skewing my interpretation of this pick toward Big Charm, but rare candy is a great pick. All right, here, just looking at some of the search options, some of the draw options, looking at my deck for reasons that we will discover as soon as I see the pack. Okay. I am trying to determine whether I have the bench space for Delcatty, or whether it is, and I'm also seeing whether I have a Skitty in my pool, because we are in pack 7. There are only 3 Skitties in the cube, so I'm not super confident that if I pick the Delcatty here, I can end up getting the Skitty, and that's why I end up deciding against it. I go for the Challenge in this pack, because Challenge is one of the best items there is. Even if it's, regardless of which side you get, whether it's fill your bench or draw 2, you're always happy to have Challenge in your hand. So I go for that after all considerations are made. Torn between Verbank, Focus Band, and Roseanne's and Air Balloon here. It's tough. Verbank, of course, critical to my strategy, but I'm thinking I have 2 Verbanks already. I have the Dark Porygon 2, and I'm a little bit light on consistency for where I'd like to be. So after some consideration, I do take the Roseanne's Research out of this pack. And here I'm on the Focus Band for a little bit because I'm thinking, oh, you know, it makes my tanks harder to take down, but I decide that it's too vulnerable to tool removal. There are quite a few tool removal cards in this cube, and it's just not as responsible as the Roseanne's. I think the Roseanne's is the right pick. Volkner's, pretty much a snap pick here. I generally like Volkner's Philosophy over Hole and Scientist. It's a little bit more reliable. Discard 1, draw to 6, usually nets you 4 or 5 cards. Even if it only nets you 3, discard 1, draw 3 is what plenty of supporters do, and you play those all the same. So, big fan of Volkner's Philosophy. I just snapped that up pretty quick. I look at this pack for a second, and it takes me a minute, and I end up realizing that Spiritomb from Arceus is here. I don't have any Pokemon that search other Pokemon in this deck yet, and Spiritomb from Arceus is one of the best ones that there is, so I take that to buff out my consistency. Wager would be another consideration here, but I don't have any support Pokemon to draw back out of a Wager, so I think Spiritomb was right. If I had like a backup Porygon, Claydol, even Delcatty, then Team Galactic's Wager goes up in value a lot, but given what's in the deck right now, it's got to be Spiritomb. Here, I'm between Kricketot, Dual Ball, and Cyrus's Conspiracy. I think I actually make the wrong choice. Bug Hunch Kricketot is phenomenal, especially if you're playing a grass deck that is aiming to set up quite a few grass-type Pokemon. But in this case, I should have identified better that I was just trying to be as fast as possible, and that Dual Ball would have been a lot better for my deck. And in retrospect, Dual Ball would have been a lot better for my deck. I ended up dropping Kricketot because it wasn't fast enough. Both Spiritomb and Chatot are faster because they attack for free, so you can attach an energy to your active and retreat back and use their attack in the same turn. Whereas Kricketot, it's going to take you an extra turn unless you start with it. I think that was a lapse in judgment, and I should have considered my pool better and taken the Dual Ball instead. Here I'm looking at a few cards. I don't really need any more Bellsprouts. I don't need any more Spinarak's. I have all of them that I need. I take the Magneton. because I am looking at having grass and water type attackers. I think it was the right pick in retrospect. It doesn't end up making the deck just because I have so many cheap attacks. Having to return that energy to hand is pretty bad. But I do think it was the right pick. Shaman level X, both of them come back, actually. So I take one. I only really wanted one, so nothing lost there. Pretty happy for that. I don't realistically think that there was any chance that Shaman level X didn't come back, especially since there were two of them in the same pack, which was pretty lucky for me. So that was a good judgment call, for sure. Earlier in the draft, this would definitely not be a safe thing to do, I will say, just because this is late, things have been called out. Take the Celios. Celios is a very good card. Don't really have anything else that demands a pick. Take the Shaman. I don't expect to play this card. I have the other Shaman that I know I'm going to put in my deck, and I don't think this one's very good. But I take it just in case I end up needing or wanting the other card that'll go up into Shaman level X. Earringing Bell, I do think it's a great card for this deck. It barely missed the cut in the end, but being able to inflict confusion back makes reactive poison way stronger. I also just like Earringing Bell and Cube a lot. Regirock, I mean, it's two cards. So I take the Regirock because I think it's probably the better of the two. And then the last card is Riolu. And that rounds out the draft. I have already recorded the deck breakdown of the cards that I ended up using in the draft. What I ended up doing was taking a different direction with it. I slimmed down, after some testing, my Victreebel to a 2-1-2 line because I was really just using the Guardians Rising one early on to do some fast attacking, and then I was kind of falling back into Ariados because it's so efficient. So I ended up going up to 4-4 Ariados, 2-1-2 Victreebel, and then playing the 1-1 Golduck, the Dark Porygon 2, and the Shaman level X as well. So I just trimmed down a lot of the cards that don't set me up or do something extremely powerful in the draft. And I think that ultimately the result was quite good, but I will leave that to the deck breakdown video for you all to see. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing what you guys think about the draft, and hopefully this was educational, just to give you guys an idea of what goes through my head when I am looking at a pack any given point in the draft. What are some of the things that I'm thinking about as far as what I have and what I want, and just giving you a good idea of how to prioritize cards. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.